pals, I'm here today to chat about the last 7 books I've read. Now it's been a while because my microphone broke and it was just a little bit broke to begin with, and I thought I could kind of fix it. And so yeah, I did a couple of videos where I kind of edited out any issues with the mic, and then it completely broke just after I'd spent quite a lot of time filming a video that was completely unusable. So yeah, had to look into a new mic, get a new one, wait for it to arrive. So have been gone for a little while, but not too long. So yeah, I thought I would catch up with you on the books I've read in that time, and it's been pretty successful. I'm going to talk about 7 books here, and there's only one that I ended up having some quite big issues with, but the rest of them, or the vast majority of them, I really loved and would highly recommend. So I'm going to rank these in order from my least to most favourite, like I always do, and it's going to be quite tough to do because the top 4 are all they were books that was kind of contenders for 5-star reads, and so it's going to be quite difficult to kind of rank them against one another. But let's talk about the one that I ended up not really enjoying, and that sadly is Heart's Blood by Juliet Marillier. Now I've now read quite a few of Juliet Marillier's books. I think this was my 14th because I've read all 6 books in the 7 Waters series, of which I'd only recommend the first 2. I think the following 4 have quite a lot of issues. I've read the Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy, which is kind of nice and cosy. It's not kind of striving for the emotional depth of some of their other books, but I think it sets out what it attempts to do, and I really enjoy them and would recommend them. Then I have read the newest series, which I think is called the Warrior Bard trilogy, and yeah, I had quite a lot of issues with that one. And then I attempted to read the first book in the Bride Chronicles, which is actually kind of one of her older first published series, and had quite a lot of issues with that. So very mixed results with this author, although I do truly love Daughter of the Forest and need to reread that one. So the premise of Heart's Blood is that it is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. I thought this was one of her young adult books, but I would say this reads like her books for adult readers does. The protagonist, I think, is around 19 years old, but the kind of tone of voice is aimed at adult readers. And yeah, my issue with a lot of the Juliet Marillier books I haven't enjoyed is that she doesn't really trust her readers. So she takes a long time to get anywhere, and she harps on about things. So if she has a certain kind of theme she's trying to discuss, she kind of, by the end of the book, it's really rammed down your throat and you're told about it time and time and time again. And that was a big issue I had with this one. So the kind of main theme of this book is hope, and how, the story of Beauty and the Beast, the Beast and his household have no real hope that the curse will ever be broken. And we follow this young woman who is fleeing from this kind of violent past, ends up at the castle with them working as a scribe in the library, and she kind of brings hope with her. And yeah, when this is mentioned the first few times, you're like, yep, fine, acceptable. But then I don't know how many times the word hope was used in this book. It was excessive, and at the end it was kind of unbearable. I also think that there is a plot point in this book that I felt like as soon as I was introduced to a character, the moment they walked in the room, I had them figured out, and I was thinking, okay, so our protagonist is going to figure them out pretty soon, and then, maybe not be able to convince the other people in the castle. That isn't what happens. Instead, we're supposed to believe that for several hundred pages, she doesn't figure it out. And I was thinking, this can't just be me. And so I went and had a look at Goodreads reviews of this one, and everyone who had given this a lower rating said exactly the same, from the first page they knew. So it's definitely not just a me thing. I just think if you're going to make it so obvious, then you have to not make a large part of the plot be based on the fact that we're not supposed to know this thing that we definitely know. So yeah, I ended up finding this one a real disappointment. It's a shame because I found that the first 150 pages were pretty solid, real cozy vibes, set in a castle. There's lots of discussions of farm life and gardens and life in the kitchen, and she's working in a library, so it has all those lovely cozy vibes. But yeah, when the plot starts going a bit more, I just feel like 100 pages could have been cut from this one, and it would have been a stronger book. So this ended up being somewhere around a 2.5 star read for me. And I don't know with Juliet Marillier, let me know. There's a few other series of hers that I still haven't read, which are kind of the less well-known ones, and I think some of them are written for young adults. But let me know if you have read those and whether you think I should give them a go. So the next one is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I actually just finished this book before I switched the camera on, so I thought I would finish it in time to chat about it today. And I only started this last night. This book was around 320 pages and I think I got to page 270 like yesterday. It's a very quick, easy read, and then I just sat and finished it today while I had my lunch. So this is a very cozy, kind of delightful read. It's not perfect by any means. I think these type of books is all down to the level of kind of romance and twee you can put up with. And yeah, I prefer this to be a bit less twee and a bit less kind of cheesy with the romance, but that's kind of what this book is designed to be. So this is a cozy romance, but I would say that the romance takes much more of a backseat in this book and actually doesn't really properly come into play until like the last third of this book even. And there is like a tiny bit of spice right at the end, but other than that, this is much more focused on being like a found family story. So this is about a young woman who happens to be a witch, and there aren't many witches left in the world, and because of a curse they can't spend any time with one another, because if they do there's like magical catastrophes. But she is pretending to be a witch on the internet, but like she thinks people believe that she's pretending, so she's not kind of like selling out the fact that she's really a witch. And someone sees this YouTube channel and asks her to come and work at their cottage in Norfolk, which is where I live, because they have 3 young witches who are living together and shouldn't be, because that's, you know, going to cause lots of magical accidents. And they want her to come and teach these young witches to kind of use their magic. And within this house with these young girls, there's a few other characters who are all kind of like found family, including this very moody librarian who she has romantic feelings for. So this is described as like a grumpy sunshine romance, and I don't know, never read one of those. I think I maybe have read 1 or 2. I think The Love Hypothesis might have been a grumpy sunshine trope. I feel like with this one he wasn't actually that grumpy. It's a bit weird, isn't it, when this trope is dealt with, because you're supposed to want the sunshiny character to be with the grumpy one, but in order to like the grumpy character they end up not being that grumpy, and it's just kind of this kind of facade to add a little bit of intrigue to the plot, I think. So yeah, this is like this kind of cute magical world, and I really enjoyed like the home this is set in. I think there is a follow one which I will probably pick up. So yeah, I would recommend this one if you just want a cozy kind of easy read, but it's not doing anything like spectacular, and it is like a little bit twee. Now this is where it gets tricky for me, because all of these books were contenders for 5-star ratings from me, and so yeah, to kind of rank them against one another is difficult. So just know that from this point onwards, I would highly recommend all of these books. I think they're all really well written, and they're all kind of in contention for favourite reads of the year for me. So I've had a very good run, except for that first one. So firstly, I'm going to talk about Shy Creatures by Claire Chambers. This is a new book. This has just come out in the UK. I think maybe it doesn't come out in North America until November, but if you like the sound of this, definitely get it pre-ordered either from your local bookshop or your library. I borrowed this one from my library. And I picked this one up because I really enjoy Small Pleasures, which is her previous book. I've actually picked up one of her older books called Swimming Lessons, which I liked nowhere near as much, and so I'm still unsure as to whether to give like more of her backlist a chance. I found that Swimming Lessons was very dated, especially in terms of how it dealt with dynamics between like men and women. But yeah, really enjoyed these two, which are historical books, and Shy Creatures is set in 1964 in Croydon. We're following this young woman who is an art therapist at a psychiatric hospital, and she has been having an affair with one of the doctors for I think a year or so. He is married with children, and she knows he never intends to leave his wife. And when the book opens, she says that this is kind of the point at which she realises this affair is going to end. And that is tied into the fact that she gets a phone call one day from this doctor who she's having an affair with, and he says, I think you're going to find this really interesting. I want you to come to this house because we found someone we think needs to come onto the ward who I think you will be intrigued by. So she arrives at the house, and it turns out that in this house, a man has been living, and he hasn't left the house for, I think, around 20 years. And he appears to be, I think, around 40 years old. And he has been living there with his elderly aunt, and she has somehow kept him sequestered in this house for all that time. And they've had this kind of argument which has caused so much of a ruckus, the neighbours have called the police. And the police and social services arrive and find the conditions this man is living in, and feel that both the aunt and this man himself need psychiatric help, so they are admitted to the ward. But when they find this man, one thing they find out about him is that he is an absolutely fantastic artist. They find a lot of his art in the house, and because of that, Helen has a real interest in him and in working with him in art therapy. So that's in the first couple of chapters. So you're introduced to Helen as she meets this man who's called William, the man who has been sequestered for all these years, and he happens to be mute as well, so they can't really find out much about his life, and they're very confused about the reasons why he hasn't left the house in so long. And they're also unsure as to whether he needs to be in a psychiatric ward, how much support he needs, because he doesn't talk and doesn't tell them. And so the rest of the book from then on is mainly from Helen's perspective, but there's also, every few chapters of Helen's perspective, you get a chapter of William's history, and that is going backwards in time. So it starts with the day of the argument William has with his aunt, and then it works backwards, jumps several years each time, until you find out the kind of catastrophic event which led to him being kept in this house for so long. Like her previous book, Small Pleasures, she has a really cosy writing style. I think there's something about this type of historical time period in Britain that just has that sense of coziness to it. So if you enjoy reading about that time period and you like writers who are really good at the historical detail, then I would definitely recommend giving this book a go. Her books, at least these last two, have a very gentle feel to them. They're very soft. There is big upsetting things that happen in them, but at all points you feel kind of somewhat protected from these awful things, or at least I did when I read these two books. So yeah, there is some upsetting content to do with William's life and the reasons he's been in this house and the reasons he is mute. But I think there is an awful lot of kind of warmth and love and affection and kind of well-meaning people who want to help one another, which stops this book from being kind of too mired in some really traumatic experiences that the characters have. So yeah, I would really recommend this. I feel like I perhaps enjoyed Small Pleasures a little bit more. I think this one was a little bit twee, just a tiny bit. And yeah, I think maybe Small Pleasures was less so, but I like the way this one wrapped up. I will continue to pick up the books she brings out in the future, and like I said, I'd be really interested to hear if you would recommend any of her older books. Then we have a children's book or middle grade book. This is for readers aged between 9 and 12, but of course I'm an adult and I read and really loved this one, and that is How to Be More Hedgehog by Anne Marie Conway. So as with quite a few of these books, this was on my autumn TBR, so I'm working my way through it slowly but surely. And this was such a joy. I stumbled across this because I saw the cover and the title and was just like, oh my God, this book looks amazing. And it truly was. Johnny and I, my partner, read this aloud to one another, usually in bed at night before we went to sleep. And in the end, Johnny read the majority of it out loud because, he doesn't read a lot and he really enjoyed reading out loud. So it was very nice for me to just get to lie there and listen to this. And this is the perfect book to have read aloud to you. I wish I had children in my life who were in the right age range for this to recommend to, but yeah, when my nieces grow up, I'll definitely be getting them to read this one because it was just such a joy. So in this book we follow a young girl called Lily who is around 11 years old. She lives with her mother and her brother because her father and mother are separated, and her father has a new partner who is pregnant, and they have just moved up to Scotland because her father is a park ranger. And so she's really missing her dad and she's missing her stepmom, and she's super excited about this new sibling. But her brother, who's 14, is so kind of hurt by their father moving and expecting this new baby that he has cut all ties with his father. So there's quite a lot of antagonism in the house and a lot of frustrations. And Lily's mother is really stressed and kind of ignoring Lily's struggles. And what Lily struggles with is that she has a stammer. And when she starts the new school year, she finds out that they have a new teacher who is very kind of bouncy and energetic, and he doesn't allow her to kind of choose not to participate in class discussion, which is what her previous teacher did. Her previous teacher kind of treated her like, okay, you've got this stammer, so I'm just not going to call on you to talk. Whereas he encourages Lily to feel like part of the class and feel like it's okay for her to stammer and not be embarrassed by it. But that isn't the way the other children in the class feel. There is something in the blurb that tells you a point in the story that actually doesn't happen until quite far in. So I'm not going to spoil that. What I will say is that a big part of the tension in this book is, like I said, the relationship at home between Lily and her brother and their father, but also the fact that they have to do a class presentation, and Lily's new teacher has told her that she has to perform part of that presentation herself, and that really leads to some bullying from her peers because it means that they are more aware of her stammer. And so this book is about her trying to work through all these things, to try and kind of find her feet and kind of learn how to be more hedgehog, how to be spiky and brave. And it is just lovely. There is a section where she goes to stay with her dad in Scotland, and he works on this nature reserve, and she spends lots of times in nature. This is a book that you can tell there is lots of information in this book about the environment that I think would make any child want to have more of a connection with the natural world and to try and help save it. I think the messaging in this book is really good. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think if this book was written, say, 15, 20 years ago, I think the way this story with Lily Stammer tied up would be completely different, and wrongly so. And also there is a boy in Lily's class who is dyspraxic and has ADHD, and there's a really interesting dynamic between the two of them and them getting used to each other's kind of different modes of learning and communicating. And I think, again, it's really nice to see that kind of those kind of characters represented in children's books. So I loved this. I thought it was an absolute joy, and this author has a few other books out. None of them have such cute covers or titles, but I will definitely be picking them up. Then another recent release is Fire Exit by Morgan Talty. This is this author's debut novel, although I have been intending since its release to pick up his short story collection called Night of the Living Res, and I'll definitely be getting myself a copy of that one now because I really enjoyed Fire Exit. I think it is such a good book and one that I would highly recommend. So the premise of this book is that we are following a man named Charles who is middle-aged, and he lives on a river, and opposite him on the river there is a house, and in that house lives his daughter with her mother and the man she thinks is her biological father. And the story behind that is that Charles is a white man who was raised by his white mother and then his father, who was part of the Penobscot tribe. And the Penobscot tribe have some kind of interesting rules around blood quantum and being able to kind of be entitled to live on the reserve. So Charles and his mother were allowed to live on the reserve because they married into a Penobscot family, but as soon as his stepfather died, they had to leave the reserve. And so Charles kind of lost his right to live there, so even though he was raised Penobscot and kind of feels like he is part of the community, he was very clearly told that he wasn't. And when he got this young woman called Marie pregnant, who is part of the Penobscot tribe, she didn't want anyone to know that he was the biological father because she wanted her daughter to be declared full blood and therefore have rights to live on the reservation. And so she lives with this man who is also Penobscot. And it's about a point in Charles's life where he has decided this isn't something he can live with anymore. His daughter, I think, is in her 20s, and he has come to a point where he tells himself that he wants her to know her story. He wants her to know her history, and he feels like it's wrong for her now as an adult to not know half of her history. And in particular, he feels that way because his mother has suffered for many years with what you would think is manic depression. And so he is concerned that that is something that could be passed on to his daughter. And he becomes even more concerned about that when he hears about some struggles she's having in her own life. So within this book, there's a lot of layering of kind of the same discussion being had, but tackling different kind of plot points in the book. And I thought that was really intelligently done. So we have this discussion about the fact that Charles himself feels kind of split. He was raised in large part by this man who was very involved in Penobscot politics. And so he feels that he is Penobscot whilst also feeling that he categorically isn't. Then there's the fact that he watches in on the reserve at his daughter across the river and sees this life that she has and feels like she's entitled to like his blood and his legacy and his story. And then a large part of the story is also that Charles's mother, who he's been not really speaking to for a lot of years, has recently developed dementia. And so she's starting to forget. And as the book progresses, when he visits her, she gets more and more confused about who he is. And part of the story that is uncovered is how his stepfather died, which is in quite a tragic way, that is very, again, connected to this feeling of being kind of split. And the way in which Charles's mother remembers him means that at some point she thinks he is somebody else, but she talks about Charles to him. So there's a lot of kind of layering of conversations about duality and what it is to be a parent and what it is to have a legacy. And I think all this was really interesting. I found this book quite unique in terms of the writing style. I saw some readers say that they felt it was quite stripped back, and I don't agree with that at all. Like, I could completely picture everything, and yeah, I just really enjoyed all the discussions. Something that I'm kind of surprised I didn't struggle with is that Charles is a protagonist who has kind of just let everything happen to him, and at points you feel confused about how he could have let this go on for so long, like how he could have just allowed his daughter's mother to make all these decisions for him for so many years. But that is kind of part of who he is and how he was raised. And so if you're willing to read about a character who doesn't always at points feel entirely purposeful in their own decisions, then I think this is a really interesting book. I think there's reasons for all of that kind of lack of purpose that are kind of worked through within this story. And yeah, I just found this really intelligent, really intentional. I also found his voice really unique. I really enjoyed reading from his perspective. I truly believe that he was this character and that all these characters around him existed. And I'm really excited to see what Morgan Talty does next. The penultimate book is Moon Road by Sarah Leipziger. So I've read a book from this author before called Coming Up for Air, which I enjoyed. It was 3 stories that were connected by theme rather than characters. I thought each one individually was absolutely brilliantly written, but I didn't think they tied together very well. This book I loved. I thought Moon Road was amazing. And if you enjoy the types of books I read that are really slow, quite plotless, very much focused on character development, but also are absolutely amazing at like setting a scene, then I would highly recommend this book. And this is also quite a unique premise for me because I've realised I don't read many books about older characters. I think in general, older characters tend to be less written about. The premise of this is that we are following this older divorced couple. The woman is in her 60s and the man is in his 70s as they take a road trip all the way across Canada from East Coast to West Coast. The reasons for this road trip is that their daughter has been missing for over 20 years, assumed dead. But they've never found out any more information about what happened to her. And they get a phone call to say that a skeleton, some remains have been found in I think a national park, and there is a chance it could be the remains of their daughter, and so a DNA test is needed from the mother. But they decide that they will drive all the way across Canada to the location to do the DNA test and also to see the site where the body was found. And when the book opens, it opens from Kathleen's perspective, who is the ex-wife in this situation. And she hasn't seen her ex-husband for 19 years, even though after they had their daughter, they got divorced when she was quite young, but they remained really good friends throughout his following, I think, 3 marriages, and he had 4 subsequent children with these women. They remained friends for all those years until several years after their daughter's disappearance. They had a catastrophic argument, which they never recovered from, and 19 years have passed since. Yannick, who is the father of this missing daughter, arrives to try and reconcile with Kathleen and convince her to take this road trip with him because initially she doesn't want to. So the opening of the book is you being introduced to these characters, to kind of where their lives are at now. Every year, Kathleen has this kind of awareness / memorial party where people gather to think about her daughter. And yeah, that's kind of really sad to see. There's lots of discussions in this book about what it is like to lose someone in such a way and how everyone sticks around for the first couple of years. But if you continue to grieve for as long as they have so publicly, people's kind of attention span wanes. And yeah, it's really beautifully written. So the vast majority of this book is them on that road trip, kind of, yeah, talking about what's happened to them over the years. And mixed in with the sections that are from Kathleen and Yannick's perspectives. Within their perspectives, you also get memories, and you find out what happened when they got the phone call about their daughter being missing, and like what happened up to the point where the police gave up. So you're sort of hearing about the past at the same time as you're watching them kind of drive back towards the past. And then also interspersed with those sections, there are sections which are clearly about their daughter in the couple of days leading up to her death. So as you work through the story, you are finding out what happened to her, and Kathleen and Yannick are not privy to that information. This book is beautifully written. I mean, you know, much of this takes place on the road. So there's lots of scenes in the car, and then gas stations and motels, but the descriptions of the landscape around them on the road. There's a section where they drive through a part of Canada which is just like plains after plains, and there's like nothing to look at. And even though that's not a very interesting kind of landscape to hear about, the way in which it's described and the feeling that they feel like they're never moving anywhere because the landscape never changes. And at some points they'll come to mountains and they'll think, oh, you know, we're through it, we've reached the mountains, and then it'll be a trick and it's just a few hills and then there's more plains. It was also brilliantly evocative of, you know, the actual emotions of what it would be like to be searching for a child you've lost and feeling like you're not really moving through time and you're treading water, and then coming to these points where maybe you get a Facebook message and someone has new information, and then realising actually it's all nothing and nothing's different. I think it was all brilliantly mirrored through the discussions of the landscape. This is incredibly well wrought, like it's so perfectly written. It's really tender in how it deals with both the grief of these characters, and especially with Yannick, how it deals with age and ageing and what it is like to age when one of your children never will. And yeah, just the descriptions, like I said, of the landscape, of just the kind of day-to-dayness of this road trip are brilliant. Now, if you're someone who likes plot, you're not going to enjoy this because it is pretty much plotless. You know, you do find out about what it was like for them when they first went missing, and then you do in part kind of hear about the daughter, but that isn't really the point of this book. The point is much more what life is like for these two people and what it is like to deal with such a loss when you're not sure if that loss is grief or just, you know, a choice your daughter made to never see you again. So I would highly recommend this book. I think it's beautifully written. I think it's definitely a great read for this time of year. The road trip vibes feel quite cosy, and the kind of tenderness in the way she deals with these characters' emotions just feels kind of appropriate to read during the colder months. And then after those two books, this one probably feels a bit weird that it's my favourite, because this one is definitely like the most plotty out of all these books and is very different to the books I usually read and the books I usually like really love. But I did love this one and I had such a fun time reading it. I loved it so much that I immediately got Johnny to listen to it after me, and he is quite near the end now and he is like absolutely loving it. That book is Margot's Got Money Troubles by Ruthie Thorpe, which is just a bit of a weird one for me because this book, like I said, is quite plotty and it's also quite kind of zany. When I explain the story, it just feels kind of incomparable to anything else I've read. So I stumbled across this, I think on Goodreads, and I really like the cover art and the title. Just kind of different to what I would usually go for, but I felt intrigued by it. And then a couple of people in my Patreon Discord mentioned that they'd really enjoyed it, people who I have similar reading taste to. So I looked into it a bit more and I was really intrigued by the premise. And then I heard that it's already been optioned to be a TV show. In fact, it was optioned before it was even published. And that the person acting Margot is Elle Fanning. Now, Elle Fanning is one of my favourite actors. I think she's absolutely amazing. And I just kind of love whatever she's in. And then I heard that Elle Fanning was also narrating the audiobook. So I was like, obviously I have to listen to this one on audio. So I did, and it was just an absolute delight, and I loved every second of it. So, premise of this is we're following a 19-year-old young woman called Margot. She's been having an affair with her college professor. She gets pregnant. She tells him he doesn't want any involvement with the baby. she decides to keep the baby. She has a young son called Bodhi, and she is financially really struggling because she is a waitress and she doesn't make enough money to raise her son, and has no one really she can trust to babysit him when she's at work. And so yeah, she is kind of at the end of her rope. She doesn't know what to do financially when her father, Jinx, comes to live with her. Now, her father has another family, a wife and several adult children, and he actually had an affair with Margot's mother, and Margot's kind of, kept secret from the rest of his family. And so he's kind of intermittently in her life, but she has a lot of kind of reverence for him. And he is kind of semi-famous because he was a professional wrestler for WWE, and then for many years of his career he has been a manager for some professional wrestlers, so he is on WWE a lot, and so he's known. And he comes to live with her for reasons that I won't spoil. And so it's about Margot's relationship with her father, her kind of building this closeness with him, kind of how odd it is for him to be living with her while she raises this baby when she's not really had much connection with him previously in her life. And then the kind of other half of this story is that Margot decides to make money to survive by running an OnlyFans account. And lots of this book is commenting on what it is like for women to do sex work, in particular when they have young children. The book is really commenting on how judgy society is, particularly towards young mothers, and in cases like this where, it's legal sex work. So, even I don't think there should be any judgment towards non-legal sex work, but in particular it's kind of bizarre that people think it's kind of dangerous for women to make money by spending an hour a day taking photos of themselves in a room in their home when their baby is being cared for in the other room. So yeah, there's lots of discussions around that in the book. And one thing I really wasn't expecting is there's really interesting discussions between Margot and her father about the kind of overlap between professional wrestling and this type of sex work, because both of them are about using your bodies to make an income, and both of them have an element of performance to them, and the people performing those jobs need to create a character so that people are kind of interested in their narrative arc. And so there's a lot of overlap, but yet one, professional wrestling, isn't judged kind of at all. It's a much more male-led industry, and then this other one, which is a much more female-led industry, is really judged. And so there's just a ton of interesting commentary about that. There's loads of other stuff that goes on in this book plot-wise. I think Margot's voice is super unique. This book is really funny. I just loved it. Very emotional. There's lots of scenes. There's kind of a whole other storyline I haven't touched on because I don't want to spoil anything, where you have real concerns about where Margot and Bodhi's life is going, and you feel really fearful for them. I just love this. It has definitely got found family vibes as well. They have a housemate who lives with them who develops a really nice bond with Bodhi. I just really enjoyed this one. And something else that I wasn't expecting about this book, and I hadn't heard anyone talk about, is that this book is written in third and first person. And that's done intentionally. Margot was actually studying writing at college, and she is kind of known to be very good with words. And in order to create distance from parts of the story that she finds too upsetting, she writes in third person, and then she'll cut across herself in first person, saying, oh, if I'd known this, then I wouldn't have done this, or, I'm being a bit naive here. And then she'll directly say to you, I'm now going to switch to third person because this bit's too difficult for me to talk about. And it's really seamless. And for the first 10 minutes, I was a little bit confused. Then I realised what was happening. And yeah, amazing. I'd be really interested in kind of the writing process of this, and at what points the author decided, right, I'm now going to switch into third and back to first, and how she made it feel so natural. I love this. And I think this is one of those books that could really easily be kind of dismissed because of what it's about, and also because it's quite funny. But I don't think that's fair at all. I think this book is really intelligent, really well written. The character development is amazing. I love all the dialogue in this. I think it's discussing really important topics, and I just had so much fun with it. I will say the only kind of critique I have of this book is that there are points where I'm unsure the author has completely done her research in terms of this type of sex work on OnlyFans. I don't want to spoil anything, but there are certain elements of the story I just wasn't sure if they would necessarily have gone the way they would. And also there's an element at the end, the way this book is tied up, that I felt was, again, like possibly a little bit naive in terms of that type of work. And obviously what I do is very different, but a part of OnlyFans is that idea of having to be noticed and get subscribers. And I think that isn't perhaps as easy as the author made it to be at points in the novel. That's my only criticism. And I'm kind of willing to look past that, because yes, it might not be true for everyone, but I believe that it was true for Margot. And so that's all that really matters. So yeah, I love this. It's definitely one I'd re-listen to, and I will be picking up all of this author's previous books and reading them because I just love her writing style. Those are all the books I wanted to talk about today. I would love to know if you read any of these, and if so, what your thoughts were on them. Do let me know if you've read any other books by Ruth Thorpe, and also, like I said, by Claire Chambers. I'd be interested to know that too. And also, yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books down below and what your thoughts were on them. I would love to discuss them. And also let me know down below what you have been reading recently. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.